Thank you, sir, for your introductory remarks. I would now like to welcome our chief guest, Mr. KRS Jamwal, Executive Director, Tata Industries Limited, and the moderator of the fireside chat, Mr. Arjun Goswami, Director, Public Policy Practice, Cyril Amarchand Mangaldas. I have the privilege of briefly introducing them. Mr. KRS Jamwal, as Executive Director of Tata Industries, is responsible for the incubation of new ventures such as Tata Health and Tata Click, as well as investments made by Tata Industries in new businesses and startups. Mr. Jamwal is also on the board of Tata companies such as Tata Unistore, which owns Tata Click, Inspira Health Sciences, and Tata Medical and Diagnostics, a leading edge healthcare solutions provider. He is also a member on the board of the overseas subsidiary of Tata Industries Qubit Investments Pte. Singapore. He represents Qubit on the boards of Flism AG, I3 Equity Partners, a Tel Aviv based technology incubator in Internet of Things and Industrial IoT, and SDX Partners LLC USA, which provides seed funding to student initiated business ideas at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Boston. Prior to joining Tata Industries, he served as Vice President, Strategy, Group Corporate Center, Tata Science, assisting the then Group Chairman Ratan Tata on strategy related matters concerning Tata companies and supporting him on special assignments such as the Investment Commission from 2005 to 2009 and the US India and UK India CEO forums. Mr. Jamwal started his career with formerly known as Tata Administrative Services in 1989 and holds a postgraduate diploma in management from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, where he was awarded the Scholastic Gold Medal and the KV Srinivas Award for the Best All Rounder. He holds a bachelor's degree in technology in petroleum engineering from the Indian School of Mines, Dhanbad, and was awarded the Scholastic Gold Medal and the Best Student Shield. Mr. Arjun Goswami, he heads the firm's public policy practice. Before joining the firm, he was with Asian Development Bank, Manila, Philippines as Chief Regional Cooperation and Integration Thematic Group (RCI) from 2009 and with ADB since 1996. As a chief of RCI, he was responsible for operational planning, RCI corporate reporting, RCI quality and skills enhancement, innovative RCI pipeline development through operationally relevant knowledge products, e-seminars and RCI resource mobilization, joint initiatives with sector and thematic groups, chair or member of Integrity Oversight Committee, chair Appeals Committee. He has also worked with Standard Chartered Bank Mumbai as head of legal and compliance from 1992 to 1996 and as an attorney with Swidler and Berlin, Washington DC, USA from 1987 to 1992.
Hello? I can hear you, Arjun. Good afternoon.
Um, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Arjun. And hello, Shruti. Hello, Arjun.
So,
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Goswami. Please begin. You are audible. So we are all waiting to hear from you and Mr. Jamwal.
Thank you, Sandeep. Arjun, can you hear me? I am not
Hello.
sure Arjun can hear me,
Can we
Sandeep.
start?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
yes.
I don't think Arjun can hear us, Sandeep. Just check.
Yeah, we'll just take Arjun backstage and bring him back after checking his audio.
Okay. This is a very nice program. In fact, while I was waiting backstage, I was looking at some of the comments and questions. And
Right.
I think there was an ask by one of the participants to bring in an international perspective. So hopefully Arjun will bring some of those, and he's welcome to ask me about what I feel about how international markets have also regulated technology developments.
Absolutely.
So hopefully we'll provide the viewers with some of those uh, perspectives as
Yes,
well.
yes, yes, yes. I think the audience is looking forward to this session.
And just like, you know, 30 years ago, India was possibly 5, 10 years behind the US or Europe in technology adoption. I remember the first cell phones in the US appeared in 82 or between 82 and 85, if I'm not wrong. Uh, and the first cell phones in India appeared in, I think, 92, uh, almost 6 to 10 years later. Today, fortunately, the technology adoption gap has narrowed.
Right.
Hopefully, the legislation gap has also narrowed because when GDPR came out, I think within a year, India had its own draft privacy bill.
Right. So let me just read out one. There, Arjun is. Hi, Arjun. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay.
It was a challenge of emerging technology.
Finally.
Okay. Over to you. I'll go
Thank you very
backstage.
much.
Thank you.
So it's a huge pleasure to have this opportunity of a fireside chat with Mr. KRS Jamal, Executive Director of Tata Industries. I mean, I think when one looks at your profile, sir, such a phenomenal kind of exposure to incubating new kind of health tech sector companies. You're on the board of a tech incubator, so I think this will be a very exciting opportunity for discussion and to hear your views.
Thank you, Arjun. That's very kind of you. And actually, the I must mention that the 3 or 4 companies I take most pride in being associated with are Tata Click, which was my brainchild and which I thoroughly enjoyed growing with the team. And
Mm.
now it's grown beyond me, in my view. My honest opinion has grown beyond me because the CEO and the team there are perfectly capable of driving the next cycle of growth as it emerges from modest scale to growing to very large scale. And Tata Health is still as it in early days yet. Um, Tata Class Edge is also something that will grow over time. So yes, it's it's been I would say it's been a privilege to be allowed, and only the House of Tata allows you to be uh, independently entrepreneurial, let's say, and gives you that freedom and that scope to within boundaries, of course, but to actually create new businesses. So it's been a privilege.
So our challenge, Mr. Janwal, is in 30 minutes to get through some very interesting, exciting topics. I mean, we could be talking to you over several days, but let's get to it. So let's start maybe with e-commerce. A few numbers, Mr. Janwal, just to set the context. 785 million internet users as of July 2021 in our country. Smartphone penetration apparently on track to get to the next billion users. Estimations of a market of 188 billion for India by 2025. So huge numbers here. My question to you, as somebody who's so deep in this e-commerce space, is twofold. Question one, what kind of e-commerce businesses do you think are going to emerge now in this next generation? Where do you see that future? And two, given the kind of controversies that we've seen on e-commerce regulations, where do you think we should be going with that? So something interesting to start off with. Over to you.
Thank you, Arjun. Um, I these are very good questions. Frankly, I think e-commerce, the first cycle and fight was about horizontals. Can you bring in enough customers onto transacting on e-commerce to justify the kind of technology investments and customer acquisition costs that you are making? And I think that was day one. And I think the horizontals did a great job of it. Um, I think day two is going to be about vertical specialization and customer journeys, going deeper into technology and saying, how can I improve the customer journey? And we are seeing signs of that. Tata Click itself had a view that it'll be omni-channel, and the term I'd coined in those days was phygital. Now it's becoming very popular and used very often, but we coined it in 2015 or so, when it was still early days for people thinking everything will be omni-channel. I think vertical specialization and very, very uh, tailored to consumer journeys are going to become increasing the winners, because remember, you no longer have to onboard customers onto e-commerce. They're already there. So that was day one. That fight has been won. But now, are you able to offer them a better customer journey? If you're doing fashion, why is a platform called Shein growing much faster than Amazon in fashion globally? And why has Nykaa done a good job in beauty and cosmetics? Because the customer journey that you need for certain verticals is very different from a broad brush marketplace or e-commerce vendor. So I think the next cycle of growth is going to be that, and we are already seeing lots of startups in that domain. In terms of efforts to regulate um, this space, let me sort of step back and give you a broader perspective of what I see happening in regulation, and that is that, by definition, technological breakthroughs are relatively unanticipated, and therefore they sort of are out there in the market, getting customers, making money, getting commercialized much faster than lawmakers realize. And therefore, the pressure for regulation comes usually when one of two things happen. Either the downsides of the technology begin to be apparent, and we are seeing a lot of that in some of the US Congress hearings on Facebook and Instagram, or the monopolistic nature begins to become uh, a potential for stifling competition. And there've been hearings about Google, and is Google too dominant in search, etc., etc. So one of those two pathways usually triggers a desire to regulate. The third pathway, of course, is when the technology is very disruptive. If it is impacting existing business interests who gather together to lobby, um, that also happens. So that's the third pathway to regulation. So, in different markets, I think e-commerce is and will be regulated by a combination of these factors. Where there is a dominant player who's too dominant, there'll be attempts to regulate by saying you cannot be so dominant, or you have to ensure you're not cutting out competition. In other places where sort of existing livelihoods or other people's livelihoods are impacted by e-commerce's growth, of course there'll be pressure to regulate from that angle.
Fantastic kind of balanced view from you, Mr. Jamwal, trying to sort of anticipate where the regulator and government may be coming from when they're dealing with this. And I think perfectly fair comment from you that law and regulation, those of us who are lawyers like me, tend to be slower than technology gurus like you, and we're playing catch up as
There's no there's no
technology.
there's no value judgment there, Arjun. There's no value judgment there. I should.
Very sweet of you. Very sweet of you. Very sweet of you.
No, there's a reason why I'm saying there's no value judgment there. Actually, I would not want you lawyers to get into the act too early, because then you may well stifle the
Yeah,
technology or innovation.
innovation. Yeah.
If lawmakers and lawyers got involved too early in technology, or governments got involved too early in technology, and not more as a regulator and not as a facilitator, it would be a problem. You may end up killing innovation.
Mm.
So I would prefer that it stays the way it is. And yes, fortunately, most technologies, the good things are out first, and the downsides come later. I mean, 10 years ago, you, me, everybody would have said, oh, Facebook is a fantastic way to get together with friends and families, and keep in touch. Usually in most technologies, the downsides appear later. And I mean, the one example which probably is different is nuclear fission, which was very early in the game, devoted to lethal weapon use because of World War II, and
Then,
the sort of positive use came later. So there are some exceptions, but for the most part, technologies are for the good and go into the market for the good. And then once the downsides appear, people begin to say, no, 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 we need to regulate, we need to make sure that uh, people are not impacted by the downsides.
all very, very fair points. I hope, Mr. Jamal, you're throwing out also a challenge to those of us who are in the profession, which is that we should try hard to be part of a co-creation process on the pilot side, rather than be a drag on the process. But maybe that's a journey we have to still go through. Let me turn to a very sort of disruptive technology area, which I think you know well, which is AI, artificial intelligence. And I mean, we're seeing a tremendous sort of flowering of AI applications, from customer data driven analytics through to drones, an application of drones in ways that we could probably never have imagined even a year or 2 years ago. So the question now is, in this emerging area, where should we go? Because again, different countries are adopting ethical AI principles. It's been done by the European Union. We ourselves have Niti Aayog coming out with some things. What do you think is the challenge? I mean, you detailed it so nicely with regard to e-commerce. What do you think we have to do on AI to make sure we don't stifle that innovation drive, but manage, as you rightly put it, the downsides? Over to you.
Good question, Arjun. And I will simplify it by saying, uh, firstly, very few businesses today who call themselves AI are actually using AI. Having said that, the availability to use of things like GPT-3, transformers, DeepMind, these are, and the speed at which things are developing, especially in the whole AI machine learning space, and the space at which transformers has not only been developed but has sort of come to market, uh, definitely implies that there'll be many more users. And you will have a backend AI, which, because the same AI can power search in e-commerce, and that same AI can actually help and power a mental health AI piece, which improves the ability to assess what the person's state of mind is, whether they're using text or voice. And and that's where intelligent regulation that views AI as something that can have downsides as a tool if used without validation. So, what would I do if I was uh, a regulator or a potential lawmaker? I would say, if it's a tool, and remember, AI is going to go more and more from tool to inference. If I was to view it as a tool, I would say any AI that is actually used in your product has to be graded depending on what your product does. So if that product is going to be used for medical purposes, then I need a much greater degree of validation uh, that it cannot go wrong, or after the AI there is a human being who gets involved, or checks or validates the results. But if it is and remember, the same GPT-3 can be used for search. If all it's doing is powering search on a brand's website, uh, it doesn't really need to be regulated, because at best it will give you bad search results, which means nobody will use that website. Uh, so it'll depend on the application. And just like, let me give you an analogy of at least the one which I liked when I was discussing with some colleagues. When you have medical devices, you have regulation which depends on the class of the medical device. And deeply invasive, mildly invasive,
Yeah.
non-invasive, purely therapeutic. And depending on the class of the medical device, you have either much greater regulation and need for clinical trials, or much lighter. And I think we have to approach things like AI in that context, where the inferences drawn from AI are going to have an impact on a person's ability to travel. Let's say it's being used for facial recognition, or a person's ability to sort of be assessed for a fine, or things like that. You need much greater sort of sanity checks on, what's the likelihood that the AI could be wrong, or could be doing racial profiling, or could be uh, uh, could be giving results that are not fair. So I think it has to be depending on the use case. AI in itself, and this is true of many technologies, Arjun. AI in itself is not either harmful or necessarily beneficial. It's just how you use it, and therefore regulation should recognize that depending on use case, it needs to be regulated and tested. Sorry, very long answer but these are deep matters.
No,
Deep
no. It's fascinating because you've taken a very complicated topic and brought it back in a way, Mr. Jamal, in a beautiful way, to first principles that we learned, with regard to statistical research, with regard to ethical research. And applying those principles back into an emerging technology area to create some levels of risk management at different levels. And I think that's what you're referring to, rather than the extreme binary of Luddite on the one side and total love of AI technology on the other. It's a kind of very lovely middle path that you've drawn. So I think in the sustainability space and the circular economy space, we now know, Mr. Janmal, just switching gear, that India has, at COP26, through our Prime Minister, announced net zero 2070. So we've basically joined that second middle group of countries, right? We're not at that 2050 level, but we're right there with the China, Singapore, that kind of grouping. And big numbers again are being thrown around, both in terms of adjustment costs that we would have to go through in difficult transition sectors, as well as opportunity. There's talk of $15 trillion over the next 50 years for India, and jobs as well. How should we really approach this? Because in some ways, if we are to meet these targets, even the 2070 targets, it suggests that we would have to decarbonize a whole range of sectors, including the transport sector. How are we going to approach that, given the challenges that we're facing in the transport sector? What do you think technology firms can do? And are there likely to be some unintended results? This is three questions in one. But the reason I'm raising the unintended results with you is the following. If we decide to push forward on the EV direction, it will also mean that we need more lithium, which we have to mine. So what do we do? How do we manage this conundrum? Over to you, Mr. Janwal.
Interesting question, Arjun. But let me say this: two inputs to your and the viewer's perspective. Firstly, 10 years ago, if you had told me, is there enough momentum and public opinion behind tackling climate change, I would have said not at all. And that was the first cycle of technologies that I saw a lot of flameouts, whether it was batteries, whether it was fuel cells. There were a lot of flameouts because in the early thousands, there were a lot of companies that got into everything from fuel cells, hydrogen, biofuels, and batteries. And around 2010-11, there were a huge number of flameouts. And of course, partly because of the technology development is when solar prices absolutely plummeted in 2011-12. Today, I think there is absolutely no doubt that very large numbers of the public are concerned about climate change. And the moment the public is concerned, lawmakers are concerned. And the moment lawmakers are concerned, at least supportive policy is almost a given, and we are seeing all of that. So one underpinning that I want to flag to the viewers is everybody agrees that there's no doubt this is something that needs to be tackled. The second thing that gives me great optimism is look what the world was able to achieve in COVID, because three key actors work together. Government, labs and tech companies, and the entire corporate sector. So government provided policy, funding, and regulatory flexibility. The labs and the R&D setup had already done work on everything from mRNA to other kind of vaccines, and they were ready to push it out. And the corporate sector actually then provided their part of the money and took it to market and manufactured it. if we can work at, literally to use the phrase that was used by the Americans, warp speed, if we can tackle COVID at warp speed because lives are at stake, then the only reason that climate change is taking so long to address is because people don't think lives are at stake in the next day or week. Uh, so these two things give me a lot of optimism that in certain sectors that momentum is so much a given. And in certain technologies, I call certain technologies a momentum train, because if you try and put an alternative technology behind it, you're forgetting that that technology has so much momentum and so many market participants working on improving it, that as an individual player, the likelihood that you'll be able to jump ahead is very small. And both lithium ion batteries and solar are, in my book, momentum trains that have just are juggernauts. Momentum train may be too mild a word, are juggernauts. What the government with R&D setups and business need to do together is, where else do you need such juggernauts? Do you need such juggernauts in hydrogen? Do you need some? Pick those juggernauts. And if you want to if you want to find battery technologies that don't use so much lithium or don't use so much cobalt, I mean, America, the national labs have been working on a cobalt-free lithium ion battery for some time, and they have alternatives now.
Mm.
You want to go beyond lithium? I'm sure certain battery technologies will appear and become commercialized in whatever 10, 15, 20 years. But yes, technology cycles are long. It takes between 10 to 15 years to take something from lab to market. But I hope I've answered your question as to why I am very, very optimistic. While in global negotiations, we may say years like 2070, I think, frankly, I mean, let me stick my neck out and say, in 5 years, I think almost no two-wheeler will be internal combustion. That's the way technology flips happen. In 1999, people were predicting that in 5 years we would have 5 million mobile phones, and in 10 years it may go up to 25 million mobile phones. What actually happened was it went into hundreds of millions of mobile phones in 10 years. I suspect, at least in two wheelers and then in small cars, because the value proposition for two wheelers is very strong. In two wheelers, you may well find that in 5 years, almost no two wheeler uses internal combustion.
Well, Mr. Jamal, time has run away from us, but what
Yes,
a
it does.
fascinating way for you to close with this kind of visionary notion of a tripartite partnership, kind of maybe morphing towards centers of excellence, a true industry, academic, government type of partnership, public, private, and across disciplines. Things which can really power us forward. And maybe the only thing I would say is the vision you're painting suggests that businesses have to get ready for this. They have to prepare for this new future. The way that you are driving forward the House of Tatas, every business will have to go through it, and that's the message, I guess, that I'm hearing from you.
That's putting it very kindly, Arjun. But yes, I'm an optimist. I think if you want to be entrepreneurial and you want to be in the technology domain, you have to be an optimist. I'm fortunate to be an optimist, and you've been very kind. It's been a pleasure speaking with you and being on this platform of Bombay Chamber.
Great privilege, Mr. Jamal. Thank you very, very much indeed. Take care.
Thank you, Arjun.
All the best.
Um, so there's a question which has come from the audience regarding the readiness of Indian companies
Mm.
with respect to the data privacy concern.
which is that while there has been a lot of discussion around data privacy, but what is the opinion of panelists on the readiness of Indian companies, CXOs, with key concepts like privacy by design, automated decision making, importance of information security, and even to have the wherewithal of collecting the right data and processing for its use? This
Sorry,
is also a
Atri.
question I have received in the past in forums with startups and smaller companies. So it's an
Sorry, Atri,
interesting question.
I had gone backstage for a couple of minutes. Just give me the gist again. Is that question for me or for Arjun?
It's for Mr. Jamwal for sure.
Sir, it is what is the readiness of India Inc. to actually get on board with all the requirements that the new data legislation might bring, whether it is privacy by designs, what would be the liabilities around automated decision making. So how do you see, or where do you think India Inc. is in this journey?
India Inc. is like all things, a bit of a bell curve. So where platforms like Tata Click are concerned, other e-commerce players, I think they will be able to deal with it at the flip of a switch. They're probably already ready. As far as I know, I think people like Tata Click will find the transition not at all painful in terms of data privacy, because they already follow what as Tatas we follow as good practices. The same applies to anybody else in the B2C space who is or has been a digital platform for some time. But the large mass of India Inc., which is the middle of that bell curve, which is sort of traditional B2C companies who are only now going and spending money on their own websites, on their own platforms. Many of them may need some transition time. And then, of course, in the laggards part of the bell curve, there'll be some people who are just not so clued into technology. They will need the services of people, but that's the great thing. In India, you have enough service providers who will come forward and sort it all out for them. And I don't mean in a bad way. They in the sense they will make sure that their data privacy. They probably already have an IT service provider. The IT service provider will help them get there. So no, I don't think it'll be any great hardship. Atre, you and I have discussed GDPR and how the Indian data privacy law is so similar in
Aligned.
structure and content, except for the sort of overriding powers of the government, which the EU has not taken, but India, at least in the draft, seem to have some overriding powers. Um, I think people who are going to be most impacted have had enough time. So India Inc., which typically talks of medium-sized and large companies, I think we're okay.
Mm. I think he's absolutely right. The bill actually, Atre, just to add one small point, still gives 24 months transition time. So they're actually accepting exactly the point that Mr. Jamal is making, that they understand there's a curve, and those companies that are mid to the small size end will then get that 24 months to get through this process. We leave aside players who deliberately, for whatever reason, don't want to accept any kind of framework. That's a different matter. But for those who want to be compliant, I think the arrangements are there.
And the
Right.
follow-up question, since I can see it in the chat, I
Hmm.
might as well quickly address it. Yes, yes. Most large companies, I hope, are understanding the importance of data and analytics. In fact, I have to say that I'm quite proud of a division of Tata Industries, which has a COE called Tata IQ, which does only data and analytics, predominantly for group companies, because we found the best way to proliferate um, and make sure companies adopt the best practice is to have a COE, which then literally goes and evangelizes um, that aspect. And Tata IQ does exactly that. But I think there's some there's some distance to be traveled before companies realize how much of a competitive advantage it has the potential to be. And therefore, the early adopters will gain that competitive advantage for some time before others catch up in terms of data and analytics. But I think I think everybody's aware that they need to do something about it.
So, the beautiful part of Mr. Jamal's answer, this is beginning to sound a bit like a bromance between him and me. But the beautiful part of his answer is that this center of excellence idea that he's talking about, actually, if you connect the dots, it connects up to what he was saying earlier about the corporate academic kind of collaboration, because that's what centers of excellence can do. That's what the Germans did in the Ruhr. That's the kind of vision he's painting. And I think if we do that, then the data analytics side will really start to flow.
I think we've gone way over time, if I'm not wrong, Atrey.
I was frightened of the clock, but luckily Atrey was not, and the questions deserved answering by Mr. Jamal, certainly.
Thank you.
So
Thank
I'd
you
like
again.
I would like
Sorry.
to take this opportunity to thank both of you heartily for giving your time. And it's been a great experience, I'm sure, for the entire audience to hear both of you and covering such diverse areas within a very short span of time. So thank you both very much, Mr. Jamwal and Mr. Goswami. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Take
Atrey.
care.
Thank you,
All the
Atrey.
best. Take care. Bye-bye.